Hello, my name is Jonathan Bickel. I'm the son of Lieutenant Colonel J. Ray Bickel. Today's date is March 15th, 2009, and we are conducting this interview for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress. Mr. Bickel's birth date was December 1st, 1922. So, Lieutenant Colonel Bickel, can you tell us a little bit about your upbringing and then tell us a little bit about the time when you were in the service?
Oh, all right. I was born and raised about a half a mile from where we are now in a farmhouse across the street. And I lived there till I was about 12. And then my father moved to Florida. And I moved to Florida, and then I came north again and lived with my aunt and uncle, Mr. and Mrs. Howard Walters at Rarisburg. And I lived there while I was in 8th grade through 12th grade. And then my high school principal, Dr. Eugene F. Stout, took me to Ursinus College, and he got me enrolled there, and he got a job for me and a scholarship. And I was at Ursinus College until I left for the Air Corps. All right, that's it.
Okay, can you tell us about how you entered the service? Were you drafted or enlisted? And and then tell us what happened with your training after that.
Oh, all right. Well, I enlisted because my best friend in Bethel High School named Frank Orendo came to Ursinus and told me that he had just enlisted to be an aviation cadet, and it sounded like a good deal. So I went up to New Cumberland and I enlisted there on November the 6th in 1943.
And then what did you do after you were enlisted? Where did they send you? What did you have to do?
Oh, all right. Well, they sent us for basic training to Miami Beach, Florida, and that was nice. It was a 2-day trip on the train. We got to Miami Beach, and I was assigned to the Broad Ripple Hotel and later the Sea Isle. We had good food, and we drilled in the golf course at Miami Beach. And that lasted about a month, and then we were transferred to a college training detachment at Augustana College in Rock Island, Illinois. And the good thing about Augustana College is the food was excellent, and we had up to 4 hours of flight training in a Piper Cub. And I only made 3.5 hours, and then our orders came through to go to Texas. And then we went to San Antonio Aviation Cadet Center for classification. That means you were classified as a pilot or a navigator or a bombardier, or you were kicked out altogether. Now, what else do you want to know?
So then what happened? How were you classified? Did you start as a pilot? What happened then?
All right, I started out as a pilot. I thought everybody wanted to be a pilot. It was the glamorous thing to do, so I said I wanted to be a pilot, and I was assigned to the Spartan School of Aeronautics in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they trained thousands of young people to fly during the war years. But I wasn't that keen about flying after I guess I had 18 hours of, I should have soloed in 8, but they kept me hanging in there. And then finally they said goodbye. And then they sent me to St. Marcos, Texas, to navigation school. And then, am I supposed to be going on?
Yeah. Tell us about what happened in St. Marcos and your experiences in navigation school.
Well, after graduation from St. Marcos on February the 26th in 1944, then they sent us to transitional training. I was sent to Westover Air Force Base near Boston in Massachusetts. And that's where we met our crew members and started training in B-24s. And after training in B-24s, I was assigned to a new plane. We had orders to go to England, and we packed up. I was still home here on D-Day, but we got a brand new plane, and we took it up to Bangor, Maine, and from Bangor, Maine, we flew over to Goose Bay in Labrador. And from Goose Bay, we hopped over to Bluey West 1 on Greenland, which was located in a fjord. But that was a nice place and a good PX. And from there we circled and circled up until we got on top of the ice cap, which was like 10,000 feet thick. And a lot of airplanes are still buried there, but we got over the top and went on to Iceland and landed at Reykjavik. And that was an awful place for us because we had little stoves in our Quonset huts, and they were not very warm, and I got an awful cold there. And after a couple of days there, we went to Nuts Corner. We flew over to Wales, and then we got some briefing there about what to expect, and then they took us by train, ship, whatever, over to Rackheath Air Force Base, which was about 7 miles northeast of Norwich. And that's where we started training to go into combat operations. What do you want? All right, this is one of the planes that we were assigned to and flew quite a bit. And its name was Slugger Jr. It was probably the only one in the whole European theater to have such an ugly death head skull on the airplane, when all the other planes seemed to have beautiful girls painted on them. But this was the one that we flew a lot of times. And then, who's the we? Well, we is the people on the crew. I had Raymond McTire from Atlanta. He was the only rebel on the crew. And then we had, the next one was Cassidy. Bill Cassidy lived in Connecticut. And then there was Glenn D. Young, the man in the middle. He was our pilot. And he was like 3 years or 4 years older than the rest of us. And he had been a crew chief and a good mechanic before he did his pilot training. So he was very good and dependable and knew what he was doing. And the next person on the picture, well, that would be me. And then the one on the extreme is John Bosco. He lived in Long Island, New York, and he was a certified FAA flight instructor. So he knew a little about the airplanes too. And down at the bottom is Harold Mines. He was in the ball, and the next one was Gilmore Gardner from California, and he was the crew chief and chief engineer. And then the guy on the bottom, it's on my left here, but that's Bernie Farrell. Bernie lives in Rockville Center in New York, and he and I are the only ones left out of the crew. All right, that was our crew. Now, our commander-in-chief was Albert J. Shower, and Albert J. was a West Point man, and he ran a strict base. We had military salutes, and we did everything mostly according to the book. And on days off, he made us fly practice missions, and he kept drilling us, and we went to ground school, and he made sure that everything remained sharp, and we had like the best record in the ETO for dropping bombs close to the targets. And they said because we flew such tight formations, the Germans didn't attack us as they did other groups, and our losses were comparatively small. So, well, go ahead.
Okay. Speaking of your missions, can you tell us of any of your most difficult missions, and tell us about the flak and your job, your role as a navigator?
Get my piece of flak. All right, the first mission was on July the 24th of 44, and we went to a little town called Wappie, about 7 miles west of St. Lo, and this was the time we were getting ready for the big breakout. The troops had landed over there on the D-Day, but they were all bottled up along the coast, and they couldn't break through the German lines. And then we had this big all-out effort, and everything about that was available went over to help to break our troops out. And we went in real low for big bombers at 12,500 feet. And it was like being in a movie theater watching you saw an airplane get hit, or you saw the parachutes come flying past your window. So that was pretty exciting, but nobody, I guess, was really scared because we were too dumb to know any better, because this was our first mission. And then from there, then we went to Hamburg in the beginning of August, and that was about a scary one up to that time, because a piece of flak came right in at the little glass window alongside of the bomb site, and that splattered glass all the way up into the pilot's compartment, and I just pulled my head away from that. I couldn't see the bombs hitting, so I looked out the side window, and that's when the flak came, and I suppose it would have knocked my head off, or I'd be blind if I were still alive. So that was an exciting little bit of work. But the next month over to Magdeburg and Osnabrück, they had a lot of guns there too. And I had my leather sheepskin jacket draped over the bomb site. Where was the bombardier? Well, by that time we didn't have bombardiers, because somebody decided we were going to drop our bombs when the lead crew dropped its bombs. And the lead crew had the navigators and the bombardiers. So all we had to do was open the bomb bay doors and watch for the bombs to start coming. And then I could hit a toggle switch, just like turning on the lights, and the bombs started dropping. And then that place gave me a big piece. That piece of flak is only about 2 inches, but that was such a, it just came right into the bomb sight, and my jacket caught the flying glass, and the piece of flak was lodged in the bomb sight. So I brought it home for a souvenir. So, oh, and here was a 50 caliber machine gun bullet that the waist gunners, we had a crew of 10, I forgot to mention that, but they could shoot these 50 calibers out of the tail, or we had 2 guns in the nose, and Bernie Farrell was in the nose, and then we had 2 waist gunners, and we had 2 guns in the top turret and 2 guns in the ball turret. But later on they removed the ball turrets because they said they were so heavy, and we had a lot of fighter escorts to see to it that we got there and got back. Now what else did you want? All right. Some of the more exciting things were things like when I hit the toggle switch, the bombs were supposed to go. And then Cassidy checked, but I still had a light on. And then the pilot told him to check again, and there was a bomb hanging up in the bomb bay. So he had to go out without a parachute on that little catwalk. It's only about 9 inches or 10 inches wide, with the bomb bay doors open, and he took a screwdriver and opened up the little toggle that was holding it in place, and he dumped it out. And then I guess that same day one of the co-pilots fell in. I don't know, it wasn't our man, but they did lose people like that fell through the bomb bay doors. Well, then that's when we went one time. We were trying to go, a big front came up, and then they wanted us to climb over it, but we had a bomb load, and our ceiling wasn't more than 28,000, but we went up to 28,000, and we couldn't get over the top. Then the one, I don't know who was in charge, decided to fly into it. He thought he could get through it. But when we went in, if anybody knows what it's like flying in a fog where you can't see much beyond the nose of the car, well, that's the way it was when we went in this big front. And then there were airplanes to the left, the right, over the top, the bottom. They came by so close, but you couldn't see them and they couldn't see us till they were about on top of us. And that was so scary. I thought that was the scariest trip, because I opened the door to the nose turret and I told Bernie Farrell, it's every man for himself. I put my parachute on and had one hand on the handle that releases the doors to the nose wheel, and I was ready to go any time then. One time the seat the pilot sits on, the middle, the seat broke and he ended up back against, and then the co-pilot flew for him. But another time we got separated because of the bad weather, and everybody else went home, and I don't know where we were, but we came 20 minutes late. Everybody gave us up for lost, but we did make it. Well, we had some pretty exciting times, especially when we started ferrying gasoline to Clastres and St. Quentin in France. Patton's army was moving so fast they ran out of gas. And then somebody got the bright idea to quit bombing and convert the bombers into gas ferrying airplanes, and they patented some 5-gallon cans, but that didn't hold enough. So they took tanks that they had attached to the wings of the fighters, and they filled those up, and then we were carrying over. The airplane itself held 2,700 gallons. But then we had all this extra gas, and then we had to fly at treetop level because they could shoot us down with a 22, I guess a BB gun if they hit us right. But we had these big heavy loads of gas, and we went over to France and they unloaded. We had bombed this air base at Clasters not long before. It was a German fighter base. And then they took some heavy equipment that they filled up the potholes, and then we were landing at the potholes, and twice we stayed overnight. But usually we just dumped and they unloaded us and we went back home again. But that was pretty scary if you ever went in a big airplane at the treetop level or below the houses in the towns. Well, it's absolutely unbelievable, but that's what we did.
Well, speaking of going along treetop houses, can you tell us about the flight over New York City? Were you along on that? This is a different section, but...
Oh, well, nobody would believe that story, but we were in training up at the base, what's the name of it? Up at, where is it? Oh, I can't think of it. Well, we had some pilot that just came back from duty, came and sat in the airplane, and he wanted to give our pilot, Lieutenant Young, a check ride, but he was sneaky. He had me make a course down to Montauk Point on Long Island, and then he did a 360 there at about 500 feet, and that's pretty close to the ground. And then we headed over toward the big airport at Newark, and then we turned around and came up like along Fifth Avenue, but we were like flying level with the Empire State Building and just barrel up through to Yankee Stadium, and all the time the radio operator was sending reports into the home, making believe we were some other place instead of where we were. But anyway, I never heard anything of whatever happened about it. So that was pretty exciting when you come to think about it. What else?
Okay. What were some of your duties as a navigator during a mission?
He wants to know what the duties are. The duties are you're supposed to know where you are at all times so you can give a heading back to the base in case you get separated, and we did that. And we did get back to the base okay. So you have to operate you have a G box. That's a box that the English people set up, but it gives you an accurate fix. And you have to keep track of all the time and the distance, and that's dead reckoning, and then you decide if you're going 100 miles an hour for an hour, you'll be 100, but you have to calculate how much wind there is blowing and which direction the wind's blowing from, because it can blow you way off course. So I say that it was supposed to have track of all the gasoline and how much it burned, and you were supposed to be able to calculate a point of no return when you were going over. And that point was the point where you had enough gas to go on where you were supposed to go, and you didn't have enough gas to go back to where you came from. Oh, those were pretty exciting times, but what else?
Tell us about, did you become friends with the guys on your crew and other people while you were over there, or? You know,
No. Yeah, I had some. Most of the people didn't stick around that long if they were shot down or moved, so it didn't pay to make any real close friends.
Yeah, what were you, I mean, so, were you, I don't know, when you found that some of these people weren't coming back, did you become emotional, or did you just kind of get used to the fact that some of these people would be shot down and not return? What do you think? How'd you deal with that?
I deal with that. I don't know. It don't bother me at all. The only one we lost was a young, like 19-year-old Bernie Liebar from Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. When you first went over, the pilots had to fly with other people to get oriented, and then the pilot had more missions than he had, and this kid thought that if he flew with somebody else, he could make up a mission and catch up to the pilots. So he picked the wrong day to go, because I remember his plane kept dropping lower and lower, and they should have turned around and went home. But then you wouldn't get credit for a mission, so the pilot decided he was going to try and go, and they just didn't make it. And I don't know if they were all killed or just Bernie, but I think they were all killed in action.
Okay, what'd you do, how'd you communicate and stay in touch with your family and friends back home?
Oh, well, obviously we didn't have little laptops, and we didn't send little messages, or we didn't call. We just wrote letters. I have a whole pretzel can full of letters that my sister sent to me and other people. So that's how we stayed in touch.
And then, what did you do when you were off duty and you didn't have to fly?
Oh, like I said before, if we could get a practice mission in, the colonel had us working at becoming more proficient, and if we could, we'd go into Norwich and go to see a show if that were possible. I had 2-day, 3-day passes that we went to London, and I went to Cambridge, and a week passed that I went to Scotland. I went to Scotland, to Edinburgh and Loch Lomond and those places I had read about earlier. So that was about it. There wasn't that much time. There wasn't much time off.
Okay, thank you. All right. And then what happened then when you completed your missions? Or tell us what happened leading up to number 35, and then what happened to you?
Oh. Well, when I first got there, you only had to do 25 because they were losing about 1 out of every 3 people. And then as we had better fighter escort, the P-51s had long-range gas tanks. They could almost go all the way with us to the target. And then they upped the ante, and you had to fly 30 missions, and then they made it 35 missions before you could go home, because most of the people were flak happy by that time. But some did get a break and go to a rest home over there, which I never did. But what was the rest of that question? I remember.
And then what did you do after you achieved your 35 missions?
Oh, all right. After we got the 35 missions, I was reassigned to the 437th Troop Carrier Wing, based at Swindon, which is near Reading in England. And there I made myself very scarce. I was not about to get out there and volunteer for anything because it was a glider base, and that's where we had all these poor people. I call them poor people. They were in a cage, a big barbed wire jail, and they kept them in the jail because they probably would have gone overboard if they had a chance. But these were the guys that went in those little, I say crummy gliders, because that the C-47s towed them over. And the one time when we were flying, they were taking them over to Arnhem for the Operation Market Garden. I don't know who dreamt that up, but it was like in the bridge too far. Our lines were so extended, and the Germans decimated the British and the Americans. Well, what did I do? I didn't do much except stay out of the road till I got my orders to go home. And then I got orders to go back to Prestwick in Scotland, and from there we got an ATC flight that brought us over to Washington, D.C. And then what did I do from there? Well, then you got a rest. You could go home for a while. And after I had my leave, I reported to Miami Beach, same place I'd been when I started. It was made a round robin there, and it was back to where I started from. And after rest and recuperation, then I got sent to Texas, over to, it wasn't St. Marcus, it was Ellington Field. Ellington Field had advanced air transport command navigation training. So I went there, and I don't know how long I stayed there, but then I had orders to go to Rosecrans Field in St. Joe, Missouri, the eastern terminus of the Pony Express started there, and it went out to like San Francisco. So I stayed there for a while. That was nice. We had German POWs to serve our meals, and they were just like 18, 19-year-old. They were just kids like all the rest of us, but they had it much better over here than our guys had in their camps, because they didn't have much to eat over there, and the Germans didn't have much to eat either. But anyway, from there I got assigned to Detroit at the old Willow Run plant. It's the municipal airport. I thought, and I was in Air Transport Command. And I thought that was pretty much fun because nobody was shooting at us. And I enjoyed the flights. We had little tickets. We could write our own ticket, and we could bump most anybody off an airplane except the president and his gang. But we were able to fly over to England on commercial airlines with a skeleton crew of the pilot and co-pilot, navigator and engineer. And then we picked up these old beat-up B-24s and brought them home. And then they took them down to, down near Roswell, where they had the big boneyard, and they took them down there and scrapped them. So I had 2 good trips to England doing that. I had one to Bermuda, and I had some to California. Yeah, the Air Transport Command was nice. We had nice planes, and we had lots of money, and everything worked out fine. All right, I put some of my medals and my insignia inside the case. And the one that I like the best, that I'm most proud of, I guess, is this Distinguished Flying Cross. As we got a Distinguished Flying Cross after our 35 missions. Oh, you're okay, I forgot about that. All right, the Distinguished Flying Cross, it says red, white, and blue medal. And then an air medal. We got an air medal after 6 missions. And then for every 6 after that, you got a little oak leaf cluster. So they gave you an oak leaf cluster to put on your air medal instead of more air medals. And that's a European Theater Operational ribbon. And up here, I have my Navigator Wings. They're tarnished, but they're sterling silver. That's why they're so tarnished. And that insignia is from the aviation cadet days. Aviation cadets got to wear the big wings on their caps. That's the American Theater and the Victory Medal. And this was our 4th 67th Bomb Group insignia. And then that was the 2nd Air Division of the 8th Air Force. The 2nd Air Division was made up of all B-24s. And how did we keep in touch? We used to always send Christmas cards, or we'd go and visit each other. My pilot, Glenn Young, that lived out in Galena, Illinois, after the war, he went back to working on the railroad, and I went to Penn State and finished Penn State in 1947, and then I became a vocational agriculture teacher, and our kids used to go to the National FFA. That was the Future Farmers of America convention that was held in Kansas City every fall. So if I drive a school van out or take the car, and I have a load of kids, but we'd always stopped off to see my old pilot and his family. And as far as the ones in Atlanta, McTire used to always be very hospitable. We used to go to see the people at the reunions. We still go. We have a 2nd Air Division reunion. That's all the B-24 people. And then we have a 467th, our bomb group has its own reunion. But they're getting very sparse, and I don't know how long they'll keep going, but I guess not much longer, as everybody keeps dropping out. What else did you ask?
Where were you when the war ended, and how were you received when you came home?
Oh, where was I? I was hitchhiking home from Detroit. I had just come back from someplace. And I didn't have a car, but I did get a Cushman motor scooter in Houston, Texas. I had to go to the control board and the ration board, and I got a little 4-horsepower Cushman scooter. And I did forget to mention, I never had a bicycle when I was young, and I wasn't that good at riding a bicycle. So like on the first time we were going to go to London in England, I know this is going, anyway, there was a car, and I was driving so dumb on the left-hand side of the road, and I hit the car with a bicycle, and it threw me on the, I don't know if the roads were cement or blacktop, but I had a musette bag on my right hip with a lot of stuff in it, and that kept me from getting hurt. But then the next time, you'd think I'd be better by now, but when I turned off to the right to go to the railroad station, there's a poor little old lady stepped in front of my bike, and I couldn't stop, and I knocked her down. So I gave her £1. I don't know what £1 was worth anymore, but anyway, the bike people fixed me up every time. And then about the last time, the front part of my bike came off at the frame, and it went one way and I went the other way. But so I never did have a bicycle over there. Well, I guess what was I doing? I don't think anybody missed me when I came back. They didn't even know I was gone, most people, because I had been in college before and I wasn't around here, so they didn't know that I was away in the first place. So, no, I didn't get a ticker tape parade or anything like that.
How did your wartime service shape the rest of your life, and did you learn anything from it?
Did I learn anything? I don't know what I was supposed to learn, but I signed up to be in the reserves, and I used to like going to my reserve training every summer for 2 weeks, sometimes Texas, Indianapolis, wherever. And then I kept working to get my credits toward my next. You had to have 50 points a year to get promoted, and that's how I got to get to the silver oak leaf was for a lieutenant colonel, and the bronze oak leaf was for a major, and then I had the captain bars, and first lieutenant is as high as I got while I was on active duty, but I started out as a second lieutenant, and a lot of them started out as flight officers. They didn't get a commission, and there was a difference. They got an extra 20% increase in pay, and we only got 10%. I don't know how they figured that out, but that's how it worked.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. Are there any other things that you want to show us, such as your jackets and things like that? Any artifacts that you have that you like to share besides the ones you've already shared with us?
Well, shows Norwich up here, and the blue lines are all missions. These first missions were over here at the invasion beaches, and then we'd take out some of the V1 and the V2 bomb rocket places along here, and then all the rest were in there, and the red pins don't signify anything more except I ran out of blue pins. But the white line shows places where Jonathan and I and my wife went. We had like a 10-country trip back in '84, and he's gone to all these places, including over there is Russia and Norway and Sweden and Finland, and over there on that triangle is the place when we went to Greece, and we went to Istanbul and down to Corinth and also to Ephesus, and then we can't put it all on here, but we did take a trip to Africa, to Kenya for the game runs, and we went to Egypt and went in the Great Pyramid. That's sort of exciting. If you get claustrophobia, don't go in the pyramid, but you can't get out. Well, that was just a map that shows most of what we did. Well, Jonathan took that and put it on the cover of it. He took my notes. I did keep a diary. I know some people said you weren't supposed to, but he photographed that map and put it on the cover of my diary. I have most of my notes. I hated to see them go to waste, as nobody would ever look at them, so it took a long time, but we got all my notes together. He typed everything up, and he did a great job with great pictures. And one of the things that I think is remarkable, but this is my A2 flying jacket, and somebody, I don't even know who, they painted Slugger Jr. on, and each bomb represents a mission, and this was like 65 years ago, and the color, the red color, and everything is almost as good as the day that I got it back from whoever painted it, but somebody did in our gang. And this is my blouse. I do have an Eisenhower flight jacket too, but this is, I only have I have the DFC and the air medals and the European theater and the battle stars. I can't even think of all those, but anyway, this is all original equipment that is still in pretty good shape. The silver on the silver wings is tarnished, but outside of that, it's good. What else? Is there anything else?
I think that's pretty good. Do you want to say anything in conclusion?
Well, you can always come back.